Hello, feeling called to share in a steeply serene space. Mm, Feeling like energy moving through me. Not sure what wants to come through. I'm feeling like it should be shared. I'm just going to honor that which arises and see where it takes me. And the one thing that I wanted to share was experience that was pretty pivotal in my growth. And I've noticed that every time I share it with friends or with family, I feel a real energy starting to move through me. Um, and so I feel like it's something that I should share with you also. So it was a couple of weeks ago now where my business partner and I went to an AI conference. And like many social settings, I often feel out of place with social anxiety um, and discomfort. Like I don't feel like I really connect with people, and never really liked the events. I feel like I have to somehow try to fit in. So we went to this conference, and I had a similar feeling when I came in. We went to some of the workshops, and I introduced myself to some people, and then we left after a couple of hours. And on the way back, he asked me, he said, "You seem really distant and cold. Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't like these kinds of events. You know, it is what it is, And he kind of pressed further, and I said, I feel a little bit in my solar plexus. I feel like a knot or a tightness that I think will be fine. It's not frenetic, it's not nervous energy." And he pushed further, asked me to describe what I experienced. And then when I tuned into the energy of like, what is it that I was feeling when I went into the conference? There were all these people that I saw, and I realized I recognized it because it now recently has come up. It was terror and panic that I felt. And then I suddenly became aware of a voice that was in my head that I didn't notice until that moment. That was like a bully. It was like, are you just going to stand there with a thumb up your butt, or are you going to actually introduce yourself and act like a professional? Or like, what's this person going to think of you? You can't even handle a basic conference. He's not even going to want to work with you any longer. Um, and so I immediately went to introduce myself to someone. And what my partner described was, it looked like you were running an experiment. This person was an object. And what was I was experiencing at that moment was no connection to this person. I had completely armored, and I was going through the motions, just for the illusion that I fit into this place. And then he asked me where that might have come from, if anything came up for me, and I was immediately taken to this memory when I was at Google. And there was this VP who was early on in my career there. There was this VP who was very much into trauma therapy and healing and leadership development, and so we brought in the Underground Prison Project, and the founder of that organization had one-on-ones with all the leaders, and many of them had been brought to tears in the sessions, and really good sessions. And then she brought us all together in a group setting. And she mentioned to me and the VP, if you're willing to go out on a limb and be vulnerable, it can really take the organization and the group, the leadership team, to the next level in terms of connection and depth. So I said, yeah, of course. I've always been very open to that type of thing. And so I shared, I don't remember what I shared, something I shared, and it brought me to tears. I got really vulnerable. And two of the leaders said, that's why we don't bring emotion into the workplace. They got really uncomfortable and disconnected. And then the VP also disconnected. And basically, I was kind of left out to dry. And right afterwards, this founder, the woman we brought in, said, "Oh my God, I never would have had you do that if I thought they would respond that way. I'm so sorry." And I immediately, said, "Oh, you know what? I'm sure there were chinks in the armor," and it became a whole story. in terms of like where it went and where it took us and all. And in this ride on the car ride home, I tuned into that moment when I went out on the limb. Like, what must have I been feeling in that moment? And I was immediately taken to this. I mean, I actually started feeling a volcano erupt of like shame, terror, and sadness. And I started panicking, trying to contain it. And he said, "I know you don't want to cry in front of me, but if it's safe if you want to let this go." And I was still trying to contain it. So he suggested, if I want, I can share what I'm seeing or feeling. And I started to share. I was taken to this little girl deep in a well. And it was like in Silence of the Lambs, if you've ever seen it. There's the serial killer has a woman down in a deep well that he's going to eventually kill. Um, and she was this little girl that I saw with her skin had peeled away from acid or something. And she was emaciated and she was terrorized. She looked, all I could really see in the darkness were her eyeballs. It was just like only eyeballs that were like full of terror. And I couldn't really contain, and I started like sobbing, and I was immediately taken to rage. And I felt rage, the sheer amount of cruelty and injustice towards her. And then I recognized the rage. It's the same rage I felt about the way women are treated in the Indian culture, the way it's mistreated, the way Mother Earth is mistreated. And I realized in shock and horror that the rage I was projecting out there at the world was the same rage I felt about how I treated or mistreated part of myself. And then I was immediately taken to another part of me that I would describe as kind of the facade, the front face, the professional, And the word that was like blazing across the screen in my mind was exploitation. I exploited and bullied and abused this little girl so that I could fit in and get ahead and survive in this world of scarcity. And I felt disgust and shock and disbelief and horror that this is how could I possibly treat myself that way? And then I felt myself, it was the image I saw was like I was falling off a cliff, like sand, trying to grab something. And I started grabbing my seatbelt and the door handle, like as a way to try to, it was almost like I was like unraveling. And I was trying to grab something for stability. And then I immediately numbed. And I came to this place of feeling normal. And then I started to feel kind of a sense of joy or glee. And, my partner thought it was just an escape from what I had witnessed and experienced, and was feeling pretty triggered about how I would try to disconnect from and dehumanize this part of me that I didn't want to associate with. So I went home, and I was feeling really tired. I curled up into bed, and I was just resting. And then suddenly I got the image of that little girl in the well. The poem, the Ho'oponopono prayer that came in my mind. I'm sorry, forgive me, thank you, I love you. And I started to say it over and over, to this little girl. And I knelt down in front of her, and I was asking for her forgiveness for the way that I had treated her. And this went on. I was sobbing and I was releasing, and this went on for probably about half an hour. And then I came to this place of emptiness. And my bedroom door was open to the backyard. And I suddenly could hear like the rustling of the trees. And I could feel the majesty of the trees. And I could almost visualize the starry night sky. And I had this image of Mother Earth wiping my tears and cradling me, just rocking me and holding me. And for the first time in my life, I felt at home in my body and on the earth. And I just stayed with that feeling. And then soon after that, I felt like, snuggling up with my family, my husband and my son who was at home. And so I did that. So this real, and when I woke up the next morning, the thought that came in my head was, who am I? Am I the little girl in the well who's been tormented and tortured, exiled? Or am I the bully? Or am I the exploiter? Or am I the activist, enraged with the world? And I thought, like, maybe I'm all of them. Maybe I'm none of them. And what the thought that came into my mind was, maybe this was my way of discovering something that I've heard but never viscerally experienced, which is we're all part of consciousness. We're all connected. So we are all of it, and we are none of it. And I thought, like, that's one way to learn the message. So I'm going to pause there with that story and then share what came soon after that in terms of the experience with Vipassana. Pretty stunning experience there.